Okay, so the purpose of today's video is I want to talk with you a little bit about ISIS. And I understand that we all know who ISIS is, right? Hopefully, if you've watched the news, you understand a little bit about the group that is mostly situated, I guess entirely situated between the borders of Syria and Iraq and has taken territory in that region. And so what we're going to do in this video is we're going to discuss that group from the standpoint of AP Human Geography. And what does it mean? How are they different from Al Qaeda, for example? And why do we care so much about social media and their recruiting techniques? Because I've seen a lot of people get frustrated with why in the world are we worried about how they're using Twitter and Facebook and, well, mainly Twitter, and why aren't we all going over there blowing them all up, or why aren't we doing something about it? Which I think that we do need to do something about that as well, which we're going to look at. But the main thing I want to talk about is how Westerners are actually moving towards ISIS. About 3,500 Westerners in the world have gone for some reason or another to help the Islamic jihadist group. And so we're going to talk about that and how does it apply to and why is it important from a human geography standpoint. So why do we suddenly care more about ISIS than we do about Al-Qaeda or other groups? For example, Boko Haram in Nigeria is also kind of a big deal. So what's the deal with ISIS? Why do we care so much? It's not because they have an ideology designed around a framework that includes blowing up the West or destroying the United States. And it's not because of their motivations to create an Islamic state or a caliphate. What it actually is probably the way that they're going about it. And the organization and the recruiting techniques, all these things kind of strike a little bit of fear in Westerners all over the world. And it's important to understand these things. And so what is it exactly that's different? Well, first of all, they have acquired territory like a country. They act within their own realm of understood sovereignty. Why do they have sovereignty when they're not a recognized state? Well, it's because of the fact that nobody really is doing much about it, which again we're going to address momentarily. But in terms of their activities, in terms of their ideology, they're extremely similar to Al Qaeda. In terms of their implementation of terrorism, this is one of the ways that they're very different. For example, Al Qaeda, it's no secret that what they tend to do is somewhat of a hit and run type terrorist attack. They might do something big and bomb some people and then run away from it, or they might go in and blow up a building in a developed country and run away from it. But with ISIS in Syria, they have gone in and have used old-fashioned military tactics where they put ground troops down with guns and stuff and take over and conquer lands and subjugate people. And right now, one of the major issues with ISIS is that they are funding themselves through not only oil and things like that, which they've taken control of since they've occupied land and territory in Syria and Iraq, but they also extort money and funds from the people that they basically govern within the area they live. So villages that live in ISIS territories are subject to basically a sick, twisted form of taxation where to use the roads they pay a tax. To go to work, they pay a tax. To do whatever it is they have to do, they have to pay a tax. It almost reminds me of feudal society in the Middle Ages. And over time, this degree of taxation becomes somewhat of a normative thing, so that they just continue to do this and continue to fund ISIS, who also gets tons of money, by the way, from kidnapping and organized crime and other things that they do and have partaken in for quite some time. So what is it that lures Westerners over there? Why do Westerners care so much? Well, we just saw in the news earlier this week where 3 teenage girls were able, one, it's kind of weird, they were able to leave the UK headed for Turkey by themselves, unaccompanied by an adult to begin with. But the fact remains that they did, and they left to go to Syria to become part of this Islamic State. So what is it that's so alluring to young teens, or to anyone for that matter, because their recruiting has been collective throughout different ages, predominantly aimed towards young men. I want to say about 500 of the 3,500 Westerners that have gone to ISIS over the last year or so have been women. And so what is it that these young people are looking to do? Well, first of all, it's important to understand that ISIS is going to take a stand for something, and that stand that they're going to take is going to be a very strong stance. And they fight for it to the point of killing people and beheading them and saying that we're doing this in the name of what we believe in our vision based in our sick, twisted, perverted form of Islam. And honestly, for some people, that's really an attractive stance. Not so much their stance on Islam, but the fact that they're going to stand for something, period, is very attractive to many of us young folk. Now, there is a small segment of those people that think, well, I'm not making it in a developed country, or well, this place doesn't offer anything for me, and I'm not happy in where I'm at. So maybe these crazies over here would give me an opportunity to be able to go out and make something for myself through maybe violence or through service to this cause that these guys feel very strongly for. And as long as I'm willing to serve in that capacity, there's never going to be no need for me in that area. And so this, I think, and again, this is just speculation. This is part my opinion, part what I've read other people saying. It's kind of hard to understand that mentality if you are successful in the West. But whereas the West sometimes is polarized and fearful and scared and unsure about situations like ISIS, groups like ISIS, ultra-conservative groups, you also saw this with the Nazis in Germany, ultra-conservative groups take action whereas everyone else is unsure and kind of indecisive. And that's very, very alluring and very attractive to many young people, which may be part of the reason why you see so many young people flocking to ISIS. And maybe flocking isn't the right word, because 3,500 people in the course of the billion or so people that might be part of the Western world is kind of hard to look at as they're flocking, but it's still weird to us to even understand how anyone could be so taken aback by or so drawn to such crazy radical conservative stances. How are these people reaching the young people of the developed world? How are they recruiting anyone, for that matter? And it's the same way that things go viral in the United States or elsewhere, and that is through social media. Now, one thing that Al-Qaeda didn't do as strongly as ISIS has done is use these types of modern recruiting mechanisms, and it's not just with Twitter, but it's also with YouTube. We see where they publicize all of their killings and their videos of beheadings and sick, twisted crap like this that really get our blood boiling and get us upset about this. But people that are looking for that kind of decisiveness, looking for that kind of balls to the walls mentality about, we're going to really go for this because we believe it, those are the people that are looking at these and seeing their power come to fruition. Their willingness to stand against the West, their willingness to stand in adversity and opposition, and they are actually drawn to it. I know it's sick and twisted, but they look at it and they say, wow, this is the kind of power that we're looking for, that we want to be a part of. And so, in a strange roundabout kind of way, whether they intend for it or not, which I would have to guess they probably intend for it, those videos act as a sort of propaganda for some of these young people, even in the West. It also, they actually release real-time actual propaganda, and people look at this and they say, well, maybe they're drawn by the strong religious fervor, or maybe they're drawn by whatever else that you know, propaganda is always a one-sided effort to persuade people to join a cause. And somehow it's been successful in Westerners who are disconcerted with the Western world that they live in, that may or may not accept them for who they are. And again, please don't take anything I'm saying here as factual. I'm just trying to bring in several sources I've looked at in the news and make sense of it all, to maybe for a sake of clarity. So YouTube, Twitter, these two things together kind of have helped to serve ISIS in their recruiting techniques. And so it's not like you've got people who are just ISIS, who are just Middle Eastern Arabic radicals who are trying to persuade Westerners to come to their cause. It is former Westerners. It is people who have converted to Islam. It is people that have converted to Islam and gone off to join the cause, and now they're calling out for asking for any kind of help they can get. Doctors of the West, lawyers, anybody who is educated, who is willing to go off and fight and help the cause. They have shortages in every position. And so they will hire these talented Westerners to do their bidding, to do what needs to get done, both on the front line and behind the scenes. And they also are looking for administrators to help them to govern the places where they have already taken over. So I kind of wanted to finish up looking at why, again, at the question I posed in the beginning. Why in the world do we care so much about ISIS? Why are we more concerned about these guys than others? Have they actually attacked Americans? Have they actually attacked Europeans on American or European soil? No, not necessarily. They're kind of taking a in human geography, I like to talk about Walmart in the way that they grew kind of from a central area and kind of spread out over time. They didn't just pick and choose places to go. Well, what ISIS is trying to do is they're trying to establish that caliphate in the Middle East. They're trying to bring the Middle East under the control of their Sharia, or I guess their ultra-conservative, super Islamic rules, and they're trying to govern from there and expand outward. So they have not gone after the West. Really, they're not super concerned about that because the West hasn't gone after them either, outside of like airstrikes and things like that, which is not going to destroy ISIS since they are taxing the people that they control. And so, in a weird sense, they're trying to establish this caliphate, and Al-Qaeda was always trying to establish a caliphate after they destroyed the West, and so they never actually made this happen. But you've got other groups that are kind of branch-off groups in the northern Africa, in the Mediterranean region, and even in Libya recently, there were a dozen Christians, and probably more than that, but a dozen that we saw in the video that were killed by ISIS, just a hop, skip, and a jump across the Mediterranean Sea from where? From Europe to the north. And so tons of people leave the North African coast on a regular basis to go into Europe, where they blend in, they immigrate, look for work, and more of these people from Northern Africa are increasingly Muslim, which may explain why, if you look at some of the maps, for example, CNN has created a map that shows where most jihadis are from, and you see a ton of them are from France, a ton of them are from Germany, a ton of them from the UK. And you see this because, well, a lot of Muslims, a lot of radical Muslims are moving into that area. So what happens whenever many of these ISIS people start blending in perhaps with refugees, or start blending in with other people that are moving up for honest reasons, and then next thing you know, we have jihadis in European countries. And you know what? The United States isn't exempt from that. Now, here's another reason why we might care, and I'll leave it on this, is that through these tactics and through these 3,500 people that have moved over to ISIS, we don't know who they all are. I know that sounds pretty unbelievable, but we don't know a single person, to my knowledge, as of today. We don't know yet anyone from the United States who has gone over, but we know that people from the U.S. has. And these are all estimates. That 3,500 number that I keep giving you for how many Westerners, that's just an estimate. And so what happens whenever we finally do take action? We may go in and take over, and start putting troops in the ground and start trying to root out the terror base in that region where they have conquered land, essentially, and have created this caliphate. What happens when these people start moving to other countries and then flying back home? They don't need visas to go back home. You see what I'm saying? So when these people come in, we might have real-time jihadis on American and European soil. And ladies and gentlemen, there is worth worrying about. I appreciate your time. I hope that this is something that you find to be beneficial. Thank you. So why is this so important for human geography students? Well, it's about power struggles. It's about power relationships. Terrorists seek to acquire power through terror tactics and through oppression, and it's hard to figure out how developed countries or recognized countries ought to engage in relations with these terrorist groups, because there are some, for example, in our country that believe that diplomacy was never going to work. There are others that feel like we need to do something, but what is it exactly that we need to do? For example, our White House has not, really committed at all, so as of yet, to going in and actually sending in troops, for example, to root out the terrorist group, who has essentially taken control of parts of two sovereign nations, one of which we caused a void in when we uprooted and destroyed the government of Saddam Hussein, who would have never, as crazy as he was, allowed this to go on in his country. And so we somewhat have a geopolitical responsibility here, where many Americans, many people in the world believe that we need to go in and do something to stop this group, but we're not really sure exactly how to go about it from a political standpoint. Also, geopolitically, we look at the threat that ISIS poses to the developed world, and not just us, but Europe and anywhere where these jihadists might have come from. Even Russia, for example, might have some people returning that would be willing to do radical acts to get their point across in those countries and any other countries. So it's very, very important that we know and understand about terrorist groups, and in particular how these groups might relate to our day-to-day lives, and what we can learn and what we can do about it. And so from a human geography standpoint, it's extremely important to understand these things. I hope that what you've gotten out of this video has been very informational. I'm sorry if I left anything out or if I didn't go into enough detail about it, but we can't know until we know. The best way to know is to learn. Thank you very much.